Thus far, every time I've refreshed this page to get the list of contributors, I've made a API request to GitHub, and it's responded, and then I've displayed the page. That's basically working, but the issue is when I actually push this out to the World Wide Web, where I'm not the only one who possibly refreshes this page, and hopefully, some of my 10 million visitors are visiting my page, that's not going to work because GitHub may slow down, GitHub may actually go down, and GitHub may throttle or block you because you're just making so many requests all the time. And there's also the non-trivial fact that, because you're making that round trip out in the internet, different things can make that slower or faster that aren't internal to your site. So you want to cache stuff. And in WordPress, basically the simplest and the most common way to cache things is called transients. You can get into some fancier levels where you bypass the idea of transients because transients have some features that you may not actually be wanting, but basically by default, if you use something like memcached or Redis, transients will be set in that, and so they'll live there. And if not, a transient will live in the database. This is why you sometimes avoid them, is because you don't actually you only want to cache it if it's actually really fast in that memcache sense. Mostly, I'm just talking too much complication, so if all that was over your head, don't worry. The basic idea is that we can get and set transients, and the functions are called get and set transient, and that's pretty straightforward. So in order to basically what we want to do is do a check before we ever do this request to GitHub and say, do we have a cached value? And if we do, we want to return that. And if we don't, we want to go get the value from GitHub, and then we can cache it, and then we can return a value. So to do that, we'll just say cached equals get underscore transient, and then the name of our transient. In this case, I want to have a little namespace on the front of it, and then I think I just want to call it contributors. Contributors. And then because we're letting the user control the repository, WordPress has a different contributor list than Laravel/Laravel. And so I think we just want to include at the end of our name the repository itself. And so that will create a unique, we'll add an extra underscore, a unique one for each possible repository name that gets passed in. So we won't accidentally be serving the Laravel list of contributors when someone's trying to display the WordPress one, for example. So get transient either returns false if there isn't something existing, or it returns the actual cached value. So we can just say if false does not equal the value of the transient, which is we've called cached here, then we want to return cached. I forgot my spaces to be all in line with WordPress style. And then essentially that will guard against us needing to put an else here. And so if there wasn't something that was cached and we haven't returned already, we want to go make that request to GitHub. And then we want to take that response. And I think what we want to cache is the raw string before we JSON decode it, which actually means I need to JSON decode this. Whether or not the JSON decode it is something we do or WordPress might do on our behalf is really a choice we can make. Either way, a string will be decoded in some way. I'm wondering if it would be slightly faster if we did the JSON decode only once, but it doesn't make a big difference. So then we want to set cacheable to the response body. Response body. And then we want to return cacheable. All right, but in here we want to actually be setting that transient because we know it wasn't set, and we also need to do it. So you basically want to give 3 values to set transient. The first one is, just like get transient, the name of the transient. We could make that a local variable or not. And then the second value is the value you want to cache. In our case, we called it cacheable. And then the third one is how long you want it to live in seconds. If you're not conversant in seconds, you can just do 60 times 60, and then the number of hours you want it to live. I think we probably want ours to live for something like 4 to 6 hours. There's not a likelihood that someone's going to really be upset if they made a few extra contributions to our website and it doesn't reflect it immediately. It's really up to you. It's not going to make a big difference if we do 4 hours or 10 hours or 2 hours. The big thing is if someone is refreshing that page a lot in quick succession, we don't want to be making all those requests to GitHub and have them forced to deal with our traffic or have the site seem slow to our user because GitHub's slower, all of those different things. So this should basically work. If I go and refresh the page, we should have a syntax error somewhere because I forgot a semicolon, as I so frequently do. And if we refresh now, all right. Well, let's make sure, let's add a echo got cached, just because otherwise it will be invisible to us and we won't know that anything happened. So if we get the cached value, we should see that, otherwise we won't. And a got cached showed up. And if we open up the database, and like I said, these transients are stored in the options table. You can see some here already. Site transient, transient. And because we don't have memcached or something set up, we do it. And so now we see our transient right there for WordPress. And if we go and edit the post and we change it to be, again, Laravel, we should first, hopefully, not get the WordPress cache value, and that looks like it worked. And then if we refresh the page again, we should see got cached, and we did. And then we can see that a new transient was created for us for Laravel. So there we are. We want to obviously get rid of that got cached since now we know it works. We don't need to keep that around to declare it to the world. But otherwise, that's basically it. All the caching is in place. It's just that call to get and set transient that wraps whether or not we do talk to GitHub, and we're only going to talk to GitHub as these transients expire every 4 hours or so. That's pretty much it. So if you just watched that really closely, I did have a typo. Thank you for silently thinking about that the whole time, and now it's fixed. All right.